Hey there, welcome back to the channel. They said they needed space. They told you they wanted freedom. And you, with all the pain building in your chest, respected that. You stepped aside. You let them go. You didn't try to hold them back, even though every fiber of your being wanted to scream, "Please stay." You let them walk away because you believed that love meant allowing someone the room to find their way, even if that journey took them away from you. But what they framed as a quest for clarity was something else entirely. It wasn't a spiritual awakening. It wasn't a noble path to self-growth. It was restlessness. It was emotional impulsivity disguised as bravery. They left not because you failed to love them, but because they failed to recognize what real love felt like. And while they were out chasing stimulation, validation, and momentary highs, you were learning how to breathe again in a world that suddenly felt too quiet. You sat with your pain and endured the kind of silence that could shatter a person. You stared at the ceiling night after night, wondering what you did wrong, wondering if loving them so fully was your biggest mistake. But as days passed, you didn't just survive. You evolved. You began turning your suffering into self-awareness. You started seeing that your value was never dependent on someone else's ability to recognize it. The freedom they chased came with hidden consequences: empty conversations, shallow connections, and fleeting thrills that lacked depth. They traded genuine connection for temporary distraction, and that kind of choice always comes back to haunt a person. While they were out in the world trying to fill the void with noise and newness, you were planting roots within yourself. You became more intentional. You learned how to protect your energy. You learned the beauty of not settling. And now, like clockwork, they're sensing your absence in a way they didn't expect. They're remembering the calm you brought when their world was chaos, the way your presence was a sanctuary they took for granted. They're suddenly popping back in, not with grand apologies, but with subtle, calculated steps. A late-night text, a reply to your story, a sudden curiosity about your life. Not because they've transformed, but because they've realized that the freedom they glorified isn't nearly as fulfilling as the love they lost. But now, things are different. Now, you are different. You've gained wisdom, strength, clarity. You're no longer that version of yourself who equated their presence with your worth. So before you even think about letting them back into your life, you need to understand the psychology behind why they're returning and what their behavior really says. This isn't just about understanding them, it's about empowering you, because the moment you recognize your worth is the moment everything changes. In this video, we're going to uncover the 7 core reasons they wanted freedom, and why that same freedom is exactly what brought them back to your door. Number 1. They mistook comfort for boredom. In the beginning, your presence was their escape. You were the breath of fresh air they didn't know they were gasping for. You saw them, not just the version they showed the world, but the messy, imperfect, real version underneath. And you loved them anyway. You offered a kind of peace they had never truly experienced before, a sense of belonging that made them feel anchored in a world that often feels chaotic and hollow. For a while, they basked in it. They were addicted to the way you made life feel steady, meaningful, whole. But familiarity has a quiet way of dulling even the brightest lights to those who don't know how to appreciate them. What once felt like safety began to feel like predictability. What once made them feel secure now made them restless. They started confusing loyalty with limitation. They started seeing your steady, unwavering love not as a blessing, but as a boundary they wanted to push against. And deep inside, that reckless part of them started whispering, maybe there's something more exciting out there. They craved novelty. They mistook the calm after the storm for boredom. They thought freedom would lead them into a life of electrifying highs, endless possibilities, and passionate new beginnings. And for a brief moment, it probably did. The first encounters were thrilling. The chase was intoxicating. Everything felt alive because it was untested, unstable, unknown. But nothing built on quicksand can last. In time, the sparkle of new faces wore off. Conversations felt shallow. Connections lacked depth. Relationships became transactions of attention rather than true emotional intimacy. The thrill turned hollow, and the laughter began to feel forced. Meanwhile, in the quiet moments when the noise faded and they were left alone with their thoughts, memories of you started to surface. Uninvited, yet persistent. They remembered the way you listened, not just to respond, but to understand. They remembered how you stayed when things got hard, how you offered a love that didn't demand, but gave freely. As the Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." They hadn't realized that real joy wasn't about chasing adrenaline. It was about finding contentment in stability, peace, and connection, things you gave them naturally. They misunderstood the beauty of what you built together because they believed excitement mattered more than peace. But real love isn't always a wild fireworks show. Real love is a steady flame, one that doesn't burn out in the face of time and trials. Now that they've tasted the emptiness of shallow excitement, your consistency doesn't seem so boring anymore. It seems rare, it seems sacred. Now they're realizing that what they once labeled as predictable was actually the foundation of something real, something people spend their entire lives searching for, but rarely find. But here's the truth you need to remember deep in your soul. They didn't leave because you lacked anything. They left because they lacked the wisdom to recognize the treasure they were holding. And sometimes it takes losing a good thing to finally understand its value. By then, though, you may have already outgrown the version of yourself that ever needed their validation. Number 2, they thought you'd wait forever. They believed deep down that no matter how far they wandered, you would still be there, holding space for them, loving them from a distance, waiting like a lighthouse for a ship that lost its way. They didn't leave with true fear of losing you. They left with a dangerous kind of entitlement. To them, your heart was a place they could revisit whenever their adventures disappointed them, a familiar comfort to return to after chasing temporary highs. They thought they had all the time in the world. They thought your love was endless, unconditional, permanent. Something they didn't have to work to earn because you gave it so freely. And maybe in the beginning, they were right. When they walked away, you still had hope tucked into every heartbeat. You still glanced at your phone every few hours, hoping for a text, a call, a sign that they missed you. You replayed memories in your mind like an old movie you couldn't bear to turn off. You gave them space, but your soul still leaned toward them, wishing they'd come back. But what they didn't realize is that time doesn't just heal wounds, it reshapes people. While they were off figuring themselves out, you were doing the real work, sitting with your pain, facing your loneliness, and choosing growth even when it hurt. You learned that real love isn't about waiting for someone to realize your value. It's about knowing your value, even when someone else forgets it. Slowly, your need for their return faded. Slowly, your hope turned inward, into hope for yourself, for your future, for the kind of love that wouldn't have to be begged for. And that transformation shifted everything. As Maya Angelou once said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. You finally believed them. You believed their absence. You believed their choice to leave. and you decided to believe in yourself even more. That scared them, more than any angry words or desperate pleas ever could. They expected a broken version of you to stay on standby. Instead, they found someone whole, someone unreachable, someone whose peace could not be disturbed by old promises. Your silence speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. You're not punishing them. You're not playing games. You're simply moving forward, with dignity, with strength, with a heart that finally knows it deserves more than being someone's second choice. They thought you'd be an option forever. But now, standing in the light of your own worth, you've become a path they can no longer walk so easily. And that realization cuts deeper than any goodbye ever could. Number 3, the illusion of freedom was empty. They chased freedom like it was some sacred prize, the idea of living untethered, unrestricted, answering to no one but themselves. In their mind, it was the ultimate goal, to break free from emotional responsibility, to flirt without feeling guilty, to move through life without having to think about how their actions affected someone else. And in the beginning, it probably felt exhilarating. They mistook recklessness for liberation. They mistook solitude for empowerment. They believed that cutting ties would open doors to endless excitement, endless opportunities, endless validation. For a while, the noise of new faces and new experiences drowned out any regret they could have felt. But real life has a way of stripping away illusions. When the parties end, when the messages dry up, when the nights grow long and quiet, that's when the truth starts knocking. In those silent moments, they started missing you. They missed the way you genuinely cared if they made it home safe. They missed how you remembered the smallest details about their life, things even they forgot. They missed the grounding force you brought into their chaos, the steady hand, the listening ear, the unconditional presence that made the world feel a little less heavy. And no matter how much freedom they had, it couldn't fill that growing emptiness inside. Because freedom without direction becomes isolation. Freedom without love becomes emptiness. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." Their ambition was to be free, but they never stopped to ask, free for what? Free to drift endlessly, free to lose real connection. They escaped what they thought were chains, only to find themselves locked inside a much lonelier prison. You weren't a limitation. You were their anchor. You were the quiet place they could return to when the world became too loud. But they couldn't see that through the fog of their own impulsiveness. They thought love was holding them back. Now they see. It was the very thing lifting them higher. Now they're scrambling to return, hoping you'll pull them out of the loneliness they willingly chose. But here's the truth you've come to understand. You're not their savior. You're not their second chance. You are the light they abandoned in pursuit of shadows, and the person you've become while they were gone. That person doesn't chase after anyone who willingly walked away. That person chooses peace over chaos, depth over distractions, and self-respect over desperate apologies. Number 4. Your glow-up made them regret everything. The glow-up you experienced wasn't just about the way you look. It was about the way you carry yourself now. You walk differently. You speak with more conviction. Your presence commands a different kind of energy, one that can only be born through pain, healing, and resilience. You didn't just upgrade your appearance, you rebuilt your soul from the ground up. You poured all the heartbreak, the nights spent crying, the silent battles you fought into creating a stronger, sharper, and more powerful version of yourself. You started showing up for yourself in ways they never expected you to. You became your own protector, your own biggest supporter. your own source of validation. You hit the gym not just to look good, but to feel strong. You developed your mind, feeding it with wisdom, discipline, and positivity. You nurtured your spirit, finding peace that no one could take away again. You stopped begging for scraps of love and started serving yourself full meals of self-respect. And then they saw it. Maybe through a photo you posted, maybe through stories they heard from mutual friends, maybe just by stumbling across a piece of you that now radiates a strength they can't touch. And in that moment, they realized what they walked away from. The very thing they thought they could easily replace was actually irreplaceable, because it wasn't just you they lost. It was the future version of you they would never get to experience. It's a harsh reality for people who walk away expecting you to stay broken. They wanted to believe you needed them to thrive. But your glow-up wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about finally choosing yourself after years of putting others first. And now, as you stand tall in your light, they're shrinking in their shadows of regret. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice. You didn't just survive, you flourished. And in doing so, you exposed the weakness in their decision to leave." But here's the thing you need to hold on to. Their regret doesn't mean their love was real. Regret can come from pride, from loneliness, from losing the control they once had over you. It doesn't necessarily come from a heart that finally learned to love you right. True love doesn't realize your worth only when you're gone. It recognizes it while you're still there. So keep shining, keep thriving, not to make them miss you, but because you finally know you never needed them in the first place. Number 5. Their rebound failed miserably. This one's real, and it's so much more common than you think. When they walked away from you, they didn't just seek freedom. Many of them sought a distraction. Instead of facing the emptiness they created by leaving something real, they tried to patch it up with someone new. A rebound relationship, fast, exciting, and shallow. Maybe they thought jumping into someone else's arms would erase the memories of you. Maybe they thought they could convince themselves that it wasn't love they lost, just convenience. And for a while, they probably succeeded in fooling themselves, posting smiling pictures, public declarations of happiness, romantic getaways that screamed, "Look how great I'm doing without you." And maybe, just maybe, it stung when you first saw it. You're human after all. You wondered how they moved on so fast while you were still piecing your heart back together. But what you didn't see were the cracks forming behind the scenes, the arguments over trivial things, the uncomfortable silences that weren't filled with understanding, like they were with you. The realization that intimacy without emotional connection feels hollow, no matter how perfect the picture looks from the outside. They started comparing. They noticed how the new person didn't finish their sentences the way you used to, how laughter didn't come as easily, how being physically close didn't mean feeling emotionally safe. Maybe the new person didn't know their favorite comfort songs, didn't catch the hidden meanings in their moods, didn't sit with them through the dark days without needing a reason. They realized that genuine connections are not instantly replaceable. They are rare, cultivated through trust, understanding, and time. And that's when the regret started to creep in, quietly at first, then louder. In the spaces where they once felt certain, they now feel doubt. The person they thought would be a better fit became a constant reminder that new doesn't always mean better. They gambled something precious for a thrill and lost. Now they look at you differently, not as someone who was easy to leave, but as someone whose absence they can feel like a missing piece in their life. There's a certain sadness in their eyes now, masked by half-hearted smiles or casual check-ins. But don't be mistaken, just because they realize your value now doesn't mean they deserve a second chance. You're not a second choice, a fallback plan, or a temporary comfort for their loneliness. You're a standard, a high one. And the fact that they couldn't recognize it when they had it says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Number 6. They're struggling without your support system. One of the biggest things they lost when they walked away, and they didn't even realize it at first, was your emotional support. You weren't just someone they dated. You were their backbone when life got heavy. You were the person they vented to after a bad day, the person who reminded them of their strength when they forgot, the voice that calmed their storms when their world felt like it was falling apart. You gave them the kind of support that doesn't come with conditions or expectations. You offered your heart, your patience, your loyalty, not because you had to, but because you loved them. You were their safe place, their sanctuary, the one who noticed the small changes in their mood before they ever had to say a word. You celebrated their victories, even the tiny ones they barely thought mattered, because you saw their potential even when they couldn't. You reminded them that they were capable, deserving, and loved, especially when the world tried to tell them otherwise. And the sad truth is, they got used to it. They mistook your emotional labor for something guaranteed, something they could always come back to. But when they chose to leave, they didn't just lose a partner. They lost their most reliable source of comfort. At first, they might have convinced themselves that they didn't need it, that they were better off standing alone, unburdened by emotional ties. But life has a way of testing that belief. Life gets heavy, challenges arise, loneliness creeps in during the quiet hours, and when they reach for support, all they find is empty hands. Surface-level conversations that don't dive into their soul. People who listen just enough to respond, not to understand. Crowds that can celebrate their highs but disappear during their lows. Now they're feeling the void you left behind. They're realizing how rare it is to find someone who truly listens, someone who gives without keeping a scoreboard, someone who genuinely wants to see them win without secretly competing with them. They're surrounded by noise but starving for the depth they once took for granted, the peace, the patience, the unwavering belief you poured into them. It's irreplaceable. But here's the hard truth. Love and support aren't commodities. They're gifts, sacred ones. And when someone treats those gifts like obligations, they lose the right to receive them. Maya Angelou once said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. They showed you they could leave. Now, believe it. Let them sit in the emptiness they created, while you keep building a life filled with people who never make you question your worth." Number 7. They can feel you've emotionally detached. Here's the part they never expected. You didn't just move on physically, you detached emotionally, spiritually, energetically, and whether they admit it or not, they can feel it. At first, they might have been confident, even cocky, thinking you'd always be there somewhere in the background, quietly missing them, quietly hoping. They assumed your heart would stay tethered to theirs, even if they wandered off. But real healing doesn't look like waiting. Real healing looks like cutting invisible cords they thought you'd never sever. You stopped checking their profile late at night. You stopped rereading old messages trying to make sense of the past. You stopped fantasizing about a future they already walked away from. You stopped replaying memories like sad movies in your mind. And slowly, without even realizing it, you reclaimed all the energy you had been pouring into them and poured it back into yourself. And energy? It's powerful. It transcends silence. It speaks louder than any words ever could. They felt it the moment your soul released them, the way a room feels colder when someone special leaves, the way a song feels hollow when it no longer holds meaning. You weren't angry. You weren't bitter. You weren't plotting revenge. You simply let go. And that peace, it shook them more than any confrontation would have. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And your thoughts, once clouded by heartbreak, became clear, calm, untouchable. You found peace in places they no longer occupy. You started dreaming new dreams that had nothing to do with them. You began building a future that no longer had their name written in it. And nothing terrifies someone more than realizing they've been erased from your heart without drama, without a scene, without begging for closure. Because silence mixed with indifference screams louder than any fight ever could. They feel the absence of your energy, the absence of your care, the absence of your hope. And that's when the panic kicks in. That's when they want you back. Not because they suddenly realized your worth, but because they can no longer feed off the attention, the reassurance, the invisible emotional lifeline you once unknowingly handed them. But you're not the same anymore. You know now, love isn't proven by how hard you hold on. Sometimes it's proven by how gracefully you let go. They wanted freedom. They gambled with your heart, believing you'd always be there, waiting, hoping, longing. But they didn't expect you to rise. They didn't expect you to find your voice, your peace, your power. And now that you have, the question isn't whether they deserve another chance. It's whether you even want to look back. You are no longer the safe harbor they can return to when their adventures leave them empty. You are the horizon they can no longer reach. Your love deserves someone who recognizes its value the first time. Protect it, honor it, never settle for less again. If you're ready to keep leveling up, reclaim your power, and step boldly into your next chapter, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join this journey, because your best is still ahead, and you're just getting started.